The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and something burnt, the way it always did when my mother cooked too many things at once and refused to admit any of them were ruined. I stood in the doorway for a moment before anyone noticed me, just taking it in the noise, the warmth, the particular kind of exhaustion that settles into your shoulders the second you walk into a house where you've spent years being the wrong kind of person. I'd driven 3 hours for this, my brother Marcus's housewarming. His wife Melissa had been planning it for 2 months, texting the family group chat with updates nobody asked for. New countertops, custom drapes, a backsplash she'd seen on Pinterest, and hunted down from a tile supplier in Portland. I'd sent a gift ahead of time, a handmade ceramic serving set from a small studio I loved, the kind of thing that was quiet and beautiful if you knew what to look for. I already knew Melissa wouldn't know what to look for. I parked my old Subaru at the end of the block, because the driveway was already full of cars, and I sat there for a minute with the engine off, listening to the tick of the cooling metal. It was February, cold enough that my breath fogged the windshield. I'd worn my good dark blazer, the one I'd found at an estate sale 2 years ago, and had tailored to fit perfectly, and a simple black turtleneck underneath. I wasn't dressed up. I never really am. I've never seen the point of performing wealth to people who should already know you. I told myself that as I walked up the front path, I should have known better. Marcus answered the door with a beer in one hand, and that wide, easy smile he's had since he was 17. My brother is 6 years older than me, broad-shouldered and effortlessly likable, the kind of man who fills a room just by walking into it. Growing up, he was my parents' son. I was something else, a moon, maybe, or one of those stars that only appears when the sky is dark enough. Diana! He pulled me into a hug. Genuine, warm. Whatever else is true about Marcus, he's never been deliberately cruel to me. He just tends not to notice things. That's almost worse, sometimes. The house was full. Coworkers of theirs, neighbors, a cluster of Melissa's friends from her book club who all had the same highlighted hair and the same way of laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny. My parents were near the fireplace. My dad raised his glass when he saw me. My mother waved with the distracted energy of someone managing 17 things at once. I found a spot near the kitchen island and poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I was looking at the tile work on the backsplash. They'd done it wrong. The grout lines were uneven in the left corner. It would drive me insane if it were mine when Melissa appeared. She'd gotten her hair blown out. She was wearing a cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities, and she moved through her own party with the energy of someone who needed everyone in the room to understand that this was her party, her house, her moment. She looked at me, and I watched the warmth in her expression calibrate downward in real time. Diana. She leaned in for the obligatory cheek kiss. You made it. I wasn't sure if you'd be able to. I said I'd come. Right. It's just 3 hours is a lot, especially if things are busy. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that comes with asterisks. Are things busy? They are, I said. Good. Well, she looked at my blazer, the way you look at something you're trying to find a polite word for. At least you're here. She drifted away before I could respond. That's always been her technique, land the small cut and then move. So by the time you process it, she's already across the room laughing with someone else. I stayed near the kitchen. My mother found me after a while, and we talked about her garden, about my nephew's soccer season, about nothing of consequence. I was good at that. I've spent most of my adult life being good at conversations that stay on the surface. It was Melissa's friend, the loud one, the one who'd introduced herself as Courtney and immediately told me she'd just gotten back from Tulum, who pulled the thread that unraveled everything. Diana, what do? She asked, with the particular brightness of someone who's already decided the answer won't be interesting. I run a design firm, I said. Oh, fun. Like, graphic design? Interior and architectural. Residential and commercial projects, mostly high-end. Courtney nodded in that way people nod when they're not really listening. That's so cute. Is it like your own little business? Before I could answer, Melissa materialized at Courtney's elbow with a platter of bruschetta and the timing of someone who'd been nearby long enough to hear. Diana's always been creative, Melissa said, putting just enough emphasis on creative to make it sound like a consolation prize. She does her own thing, very independent. She set the platter down, and looked at me with that smile again. I keep telling Marcus he should connect you with some of his colleagues, get you some real leads. It must be hard, building a client base from scratch. I have a client base, I said. Of course you do, sweetie. She patted my arm, moved on. Courtney had already turned to talk to someone else. I stood there and looked at the uneven grout in the backsplash, and said nothing. 20 minutes later, I was standing near the window, with my sparkling water when my father came over. He's a good man in most ways that count, my father. He worked hard his whole life, put both of us through school, coached Marcus's baseball team for 6 years straight. He also has this quality I've never found the right word for it, where he can look directly at something unfair and choose not to see it, because seeing it would require him to do something about it. You look tired, he said. Long drive. You should smile more. People think you're unhappy when you don't smile. I'm fine, Dad. He looked out the window at Marcus, who was showing 2 of his friends the backyard. This is a beautiful house. They really did it right. The backsplash grout is uneven in the left corner, I said. He gave me a look. Nobody notices things like that except you. Plenty of people notice. They just don't say anything. He sighed that particular sigh, the one I've heard my whole life, the one that means, why do you always have to make things complicated, and went back to the fireplace. I had come here wanting things to be different. I do that every time. I construct a quiet hope on the drive over, a small, modest version of things where Melissa is just a person, where my dad just sees me, where I don't spend the whole evening standing slightly outside everything, like a guest in a house I used to live in. And then I arrive, and within an hour, the hope has dissolved so cleanly, it's like it was never there. I was thinking about leaving, genuinely calculating whether I could plausibly claim an early morning and be back in my car by 8 when Melissa's voice rose above the general noise of the room. She was holding court near the living room, a small cluster of people around her, and she had the particular glow of someone who has good news and has been waiting for the right moment to detonate it. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, she said, in the voice of someone who has been planning to say it all night, but since everyone's asking yes, it's official. I accepted the position. A ripple of interested noise from the cluster. Director of Client Relations at Harlow and Reed. She paused to let it land. Starting in 3 weeks. More noise. Genuine, this time. Harlow and Reed is not a name that needs explaining in certain circles, and Melissa's circle was exactly the kind that would recognize it. It's the kind of firm that gets written up in architectural magazines and takes on projects that other firms don't. The kind of place where the waiting list for residential consultations runs 8 months out. Courtney actually grabbed Melissa's arm and made a sound that was almost a squeal. That's incredible, someone said. It's a big jump, Melissa agreed, with practiced modesty. But I've always had an eye for this kind of thing. And the principal, she's brilliant. Honestly, I've followed her work for years. Very private, doesn't really do interviews, but the work speaks for itself. She shook her head like she was in genuine awe. I feel so lucky to be joining that team. I set my sparkling water down on the kitchen island very carefully. Then I picked it back up, because my hands needed something to do. Harlow and Reed. I founded Harlow and Reed 8 years ago, in a rented studio apartment, with a drafting table I'd bought secondhand, and a laptop that overheated every 40 minutes. I named it after the street my grandmother lived on, and the middle name she'd given me on the condition that I'd do something with it. I built the client list contact by contact, project by project, sleeping 4 hours a night for the first 3 years and not taking a salary for the first 18 months. My business partner Jess handles the public-facing work, the interviews I don't like giving, the industry events I'd rather skip, the Instagram that now has 200,000 followers. I handle the design and the firm's direction, and the decisions that actually matter. I don't have a social media presence. I don't do profiles. I work. My name is on the founding documents and on the wall of our main studio, and in the masthead of every project we've ever completed. But in the circles where Melissa moves the book clubs and the dinner parties and the housewarming chatter, I'm just Marcus's younger sister, who does her own little thing. She had no idea. I understood that now, with a clarity that was almost architectural. She'd applied for the position, gone through the interview process, been evaluated by our HR team and our senior staff. I've been selected by Jess and 2 department heads who'd reviewed 37 applicants. Her file had crossed my desk 4 days ago. I'd approved the hire. I'd read her application and thought, solid background, good instincts, will need mentoring on client communication. I had not, in that moment, connected the name Melissa Hargrove to my brother's wife, because why would I? She goes by her maiden name professionally. I hadn't known that. I knew it now. I didn't move for a moment. I thought about the backsplash with the uneven grout. I thought about at least you're here and your own little business, and I keep telling Marcus he should get you some real leads. I thought about my father's sigh. Then I walked across the room. Melissa saw me coming, and something in her expression shifted slightly. Not alarm, not yet, just a mild recalibration. The look of someone who isn't sure what key the conversation is about to be played in. "Diana," she said, pleasantly, "were you listening? I was just telling everyone about the new position." "I heard," I said. "Harlow and Reed." "Yes," she smiled. "The full one, the one with all the wattage. I'm so excited. It's genuinely a dream." "When did you accept the offer?" She blinked. "Tuesday." "Why? And you've been through the full onboarding paperwork? The NDA? The conflict of interest disclosure?" The smile stayed, but changed texture. "Yes." The HR process was very thorough. "Why are you asking about Taliban?" "Because there's a question on the conflict of interest disclosure," I said, keeping my voice easy, conversational, the same tone I'd use in a Monday morning project meeting. "About existing personal relationships with anyone in the firm's leadership." A beat. 2. Melissa laughed short, uncertain. "I don't have any personal relationships with anyone at Harlow and Reed. I don't even know who the principal is. She doesn't." "I'm the principal," I said. "Silence is a physical thing sometimes. This one had weight and texture." I watched it move through the cluster of people around us. Courtney's mouth opening slightly, a man I didn't know looking between us, Marcus appearing at the edge of the group with the expression of someone who has just realized the floor plan of the evening has changed. Melissa stared at me. "Diana," she said, and her voice had lost its shape. "I founded Harlow and Reed in 2016, I said. "My name is on every project we've done since then. Jessica Tran is my business partner and handles external communications, which is probably why you didn't cross-reference the names." I held her gaze. I wasn't angry. That was the thing I noticed about myself in that moment. The anger had burned off somewhere around the kitchen island, replaced by something cleaner, something that was just fact. "Your application was strong. You interviewed well. The hire was approved on Thursday." "I approved it." Melissa looked at my blazer. I watched her do it. Watched her look at the secondhand blazer she'd mentally cataloged 2 hours ago as evidence of everything she thought she knew about me. And recalculate. She stopped, started again. "I didn't know." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." Marcus had reached us by now. He put a hand on Melissa's arm and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts shock and something else, something that took me a moment to identify as respect, or at least the beginning of it. "Diana," he said, "I didn't know either." "I know. I don't talk about it at family stuff." I looked at him directly. I figured the work was enough. Turns out people make a lot of assumptions when you don't perform what you have. He didn't have anything to say to that. He was smart enough to know there was nothing to say. My father had arrived at the edge of the group. I saw him look at me, really look, the way he hadn't in a long time, and something moved across his face that I chose not to examine too closely, because if I examined it, I'd have to feel it. And tonight, I'd already felt enough. Courtney had gone very quiet. The man I didn't know had backed up half a step and was studying the middle distance with great concentration. Melissa was still looking at me. Her face had passed through several expressions in the space of a minute: surprise, embarrassment, the beginning of something defensive, and had settled, finally, on something I hadn't expected. Not the performance of humility, not the social calculation of how to recover the room, just a look that was naked and tired and, in its way, honest. "The ceramic set," she said quietly. "The one you sent ahead." I looked it up because I didn't recognize the studio. She paused. "It was beautiful." "It is," I said. She nodded. "Once." And then she excused herself and went toward the kitchen, and the party redistributed itself the way parties do when a center of gravity shifts. I found my coat. Marcus followed me to the door. It was dark outside now, proper cold, and the street was quiet except for the distant sound of a car and the wind moving through the oak trees that lined the sidewalk. "You're leaving," he said. 3-hour drive. Diana. He put his hand on the doorframe. He looked, in that moment, like the version of my brother I've always liked best, uncertain, honest, stripped of the easy charm he usually moves through the world on. "I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention." "You never did," I said, not harshly, just accurately. He absorbed that. "I know." I looked at him for a moment. There's a grief that comes with forgiving people who aren't quite ready to be forgiven yet. But you do it anyway, because the alternative is carrying it yourself. I've carried a lot. I'm tired of the wait. "I'll see you at Mom's birthday," I said. He nodded. "She'll want you to call when you get home." "I know. I will." I walked down the front path. The air was clean and cold and smelled like February and wet pavement, and when I got to my old Subaru, I stood next to it for a moment without getting in. My phone buzzed. Jess. Saw a contact request just come through from a Melissa Hargrove, with a note saying she wants to clarify a professional matter before Monday. "Do you want me to handle it, or?" I looked back at the house. The windows were lit, warm yellow from the inside. Through the front window, I could see the shapes of people moving, resuming, the party reconfiguring itself around what had just happened, the way water fills a space. I typed back, "I'll handle it Monday. Nothing changes on the hire, she's good for the role. Just make sure her conflict disclosure gets updated before she starts." A pause then. "Do I want to know?" "Family stuff," I wrote back. "The usual kind." I got in the car. The engine turned over on the second try, it always does. It's reliable that way. Just not flashy about it, and I pulled out into the dark street and drove. There was a moment, somewhere on the highway past the city limits, with the lights falling away behind me, and nothing ahead but the long dark of the interstate, where I let myself feel all of it. The evening, the years of evenings like it. My father's sigh. The word creative used like a way to say something smaller than it was. The look on Melissa's face, when she reprocessed 8 years of assumptions in about 30 seconds, I didn't feel triumphant. That's what surprises people when I tell the story. Later they expect me to say it felt good, that moment in the living room. And parts of it did. The precision of it, the clean arithmetic of the thing, the way truth lands when it's just allowed to be true, without being argued or defended or performed. But mostly I felt tired. And clear. And something that was not quite peace but was adjacent to it. The feeling of having finally said a thing that needed saying without raising your voice, without needing the room to agree with you, without requiring anyone else to understand what it cost. My grandmother used to say that the most powerful thing you can do is simply be exactly what you are, in every room, without apology. She said most people never figure that out. They spend their whole lives dressing up or dressing down for the occasion, performing the version of themselves they think the room wants, and then they wonder why they're exhausted. She built a life on that principle. I've tried to. The firm, the work, the drafting table I still have in my home studio, the same one, the secondhand one, all of it built on the simple premise that what you make is what matters, not what you make sure people see you making. The blazer is a good blazer. It's well cut and it's mine, and it's lasted 7 years, because that's what quality does when you know where to look for it. Melissa would learn that. She was smart enough to. And she would be good at her job. I genuinely believed that, because her application had been strong and her instincts were real, even if her manners needed work. We'd had that conversation on Monday, the kind that sets a foundation, and whatever it was going to be, would be built from there. That was the thing nobody understood about the way I operated. They expected the conclusion of the story to be exclusion, you were rude to me, so now I shut the door. But that's not what doors are for. Doors are for deciding who walks through them with clear eyes, and who walks through them thinking they already know everything inside. Melissa would walk through on Monday with clear eyes. That was the whole point. I turned the heat up and put on the kind of music that stretches itself out over long empty roads, something slow and instrumental, and sure of itself, and I drove north with the high beams cutting through the dark and the quiet of the car wrapping around me like something earned. 3 hours later, I pulled into my parking space, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in the good silence of having come home. I was Diana Harlow Reed. I built something from nothing, in the dark, for years, before anyone was paying attention. I wore what fit me. I drove what ran. And I did not need the room to understand that I only needed to understand it myself. That had always been enough. It still was.